So what we want to do today is go over the project timeline. We've had some adjustments to the timeline based on some needs for increased quality assurance and making sure that we have a proper amount of time for the employee-manager conversations. And so Diane Blaskowski is going to talk through that in a minute. We also want to talk about the employee conversations, what's going to be happening with those employee conversations and how you can engage as employees and managers on those conversations. We've discussed we discussed this a bit in our last forums, but we want to go into greater detail at this particular forum. We also want to go over the notification and appeal process. Each employee is going to get a notification of what their new title is, along with any the appeal rights that they would have. We want to talk about that timing, as well as what will go into the letters that you will receive. And we want to go into the salary structure and how individuals promote and progress through the salary structure, talk quite a bit about that. We want to go over the benefit analysis results. We have done a thorough assessment of the market with our partners at Mercer Consulting to see how our benefits, how they compare to our peers, looking at that to see what should we offer in enhancements for benefits moving forward with the project. We also did an extensive employee benefits preference survey back last year. How many folks completed the employee benefits preference survey? All right, looks like the majority of you. That's great. So we're going to be talking about that. We also are going to go into the learning opportunities and resources that are available to employees to find out more about the project and the process and all those types of things. Most of that is on our website. Hopefully all of you have had a chance to look through the materials on the website. And then we want to have ample time for questions and answers. At least a half an hour or so, providing that opportunity for you to ask questions. We will answer those. You do have index cards that were handed out to you. If you don't feel comfortable standing up in front of the audience and asking the question, you can put that on an index card, and we will be going through those. You also have been provided with a survey that we'd like you to fill out to provide us with feedback on how this forum went and how valuable it was for you. So before we jump into all of that, I just wanted to mention about our shared future. The University of Wisconsin-Madison occupies ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Tejope since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state government repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. The history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. And so we wanted to reference that all of UW-Madison sits on these lands, and we want to honor that circumstance. So this is a slide that I want to talk about, our key project goals. We've talked about this at last forums, but it always provides the context of what we are trying to do. We're trying to establish a market-informed title and compensation and benefit structure so that we're able to identify how we're paying employees, providing benefits, and we haven't really done this comprehensive type of study in close to 30 years. And I would say that it's time that we do that. And so that's a fundamental reason why we're doing this. We also want to set a strong foundation to establish a job framework so that we can then build upon that. Things like establishing a competency model over our title structure so that we as employees can see what are those competencies that I need to perform successfully in my current job, but also if I'm looking at other jobs, how do I build competencies so that I can successfully pursue other jobs? And we don't really have that right now with our titling framework for employees to see that. We also want to create more consistent consistent and shorter job descriptions, the format for our job descriptions. And the reason for that is right now it's very difficult to figure out what comparable jobs there are across the university. We could have two people doing the same type of job, and they have different job descriptions and they have different titles across our institution. It makes it very hard for us to compare jobs across the institution and also look at what are those jobs at the market. Where should we set those jobs to the market, because they're vastly different right now in our current structure. We also want to create a compensation center of excellence, which that basically means that we have the information we need. We have all of the data for all the different jobs that we have across the institution, so that we can make good compensation decisions, whether that's helping to retain employees with compensation that is market informed, but also to make sure that we are looking at the variety of things that when we're hiring individuals, making sure that we're setting the pay correctly. We also want to respond to employee needs, making sure that employees have what they need to be successful. Obviously, employees receiving the adequate compensation and adequate benefits, then they don't need to worry about those situations, that they can then focus on their jobs and not worry about being able to provide for their families. Ultimately, this all comes down to attracting and retaining the best employees, attracting, recruiting, engaging, retaining a high-quality workforce. And so I just wanted to identify that as really the context of why we are doing this project. So we talk a lot about what does market-informed mean. Well, what really that means is for our market-informed structure that we want to put in place, we want to compare our structure, making sure our structure is, and looking at that, how is that similar to other employers out there, to make sure that what we're doing is market-informed. And so with market studies that we have been doing, again, it comes down to looking at our pay and benefits relative to other organizations' pay and benefits and seeing how do those compare. And that includes the private sector, public sector, nonprofits, other higher ed institutions. It involves looking at if the job's market is more of a local market or a regional market or a national market, looking at those things and making sure that we are essentially comparing apples to apples with those areas, and really trying to build a structure so that we do compare favorably and look at that as far as how we want to proceed in the future. So I wanted to provide some information on what is changing and what is staying the same. What is changing, as I mentioned earlier, that we're putting in place a new job framework. We also are having a new salary structure that we are putting in place. We're introducing the concept of business titles. Now, we're very similar to today where we call them working titles. So that is an area that will be changing. The position descriptions that we have today, whether it's a PVL for the academic staff or a position description for the university staff, we're really changing that whole concept of a standardized job description so that we don't have a one-to-one relationship where everyone has a position description that's unique to themselves. As I said earlier, it's very hard to compare across the institution as well as to the market if we have everyone having a different position description, and so that's one of the areas that will be changing. Salary administration guidelines, we're going to talk about that in detail later, but we're going to identify how we utilize this new pay structure and how we provide adjustments. Now, most of the types of adjustments we have today will still exist in the future. Performance adjustments, market adjustments, those types of areas, lump sum bonuses for performance, those things will still exist in the future state, but we're providing much more detail and guidelines of how those types of adjustments should be administered. And then the enhanced benefits. We're looking at how do we enhance the benefits for the university. We're not looking at taking away benefits. We're not going to be taking away benefits, but we're looking at how can we enhance our benefit packages for things that right now that we may not be providing, that other employers are providing, our competitors. I will say one of the areas that we hear a lot about is the ability to provide family leave, and we don't provide that right now. And so I would say, well, actually I should say parental leave we don't provide right now. That's something that our other employers are providing, and we need to look at that. We are looking at that to see how we should move forward. And so the things that are staying the same, job duties. Job duties are not going to be changing with the implementation of this new structure, this project. I had this just yesterday. I had the questions about this, that are we trying to basically put people into jobs where they have new duties? No, this is to identify your current duties with an appropriate title and an appropriate standard job description. Also, job security. A lot of questions have been asked about this. Job security is really out of scope of the title and total compensation project. That doesn't mean we're not still looking at it. We know there are areas that we need to address in that area. But for this particular project, job security is not going to be something that you'll see being addressed. And I know that there have been things that have come out in various press releases and those types of things talking about job security. Why aren't we addressing job security? Because that is not part of the scope of this project. Also, the base pay. Individuals' base pay will not be changed. People will not be losing salary because of the implementation of this project. Now, one of the big things that I talked about why we're doing this is that we want to see how we compare to the market, see how we can address those things. And I will say that what we're finding so far is there are some areas that certainly we're below the market. There are some areas where we're actually very competitive. But what we're trying to do is identify where those areas are and then build a long-range strategy to address that. That's not going to happen at implementation of our new compensation structure, but we want to know where we are so we can develop our priorities of how we can address that in the future. The reporting relationships are not going to change. You're going to still have the same supervisor with the implementation of this new structure. Performance and development goals are going to be staying the same. That is not something that's going to where you're going to see modifications to your performance goals because of the implementation of this project. Employee categories. We are not changing the university staff, the academic staff, the limited appointments. Those areas are not changing as part of this title and total compensation project. And so yesterday we had this question about this whole new set of titles that we're implementing that different titles are going to be created based on employment categories. That's not the case. We will still have titles that both academic staff and university staff will be in. It'll be a standardized title structure. And then the Wisconsin State Employee Benefits. I mentioned that we're looking at enhancing the benefits that we currently have, but we are not changing the state health insurance, the Wisconsin retirement system, those other benefits that all state employees enjoy. We are not changing those with the implementation of this project. So this last slide, I wanted to emphasize about the level of engagement that we've had across campus on this project over the last 2+ years. And I know there's also been some statements saying that this has been a project that has been a top-down type effort. Well, based on these engagement numbers, I will say that definitely has not been the case. We've had over 30,000 individual engagements across campus. Now, that doesn't mean that we've had 30,000 employees that we've engaged, because there's certainly individuals like yourselves that have gone to multiple forums, and that would be counted more than once. But I just wanted to indicate, with 30,000 engagements, that definitely there's a lot of input that we've been getting from the campus community. That includes over 7,000 individuals attending forums like this forum today. We've also had about 5,000 employees involved in actually building the structure, the standard job descriptions and the titles, and that continues today. We've had close to 4,000 individuals complete pulse surveys to why we're putting things out there. We want input. We're sending out pulse surveys to see where should we go with certain elements of the project. We've also had about 4,000 individuals attend outreach and training events. And based on what the show of hands earlier about the employee preference survey, we've had close to 10,000 employees that did fill out that employee preference survey. And that information, again, we're going to talk about it in a minute, that information is definitely being used to inform where should we go with our benefits enhancements. And then finally, we have over 100 people that are on a weekly basis are working on this project. And some of those individuals are in this room, which includes HR professionals as well as subject matter experts that continually help to make changes, to enhance all the things that we're doing with the project. So I wanted to just reference this as the last slide that I go through to just indicate the level of engagement that we've done across campus. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Diane Blaskowski, who is our Office of Human Resources Talent Rewards Director.
All right, thank you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so on the screen, you should be seeing a timeline. There it is. That's the TTC project timeline. And with this timeline, you'll notice everything to the left of the green line has already been completed. Things to the right of the green line are either currently underway or will be soon. The primary focus right now for the TTC team is to assess and evaluate every single standard job description and title to make sure it's accurate, and also to align all of our titles and our SJDs across school, college, and division. So for example, if you're an accountant in one division and someone else is an accountant in another division doing the very same responsibilities, they should be mapped the same versus mapped differently. So we are looking at that alignment across school, college, division. If you look to the left of the green line, you'll see QA initiative, phase 1 and phase 2. The QA is our main focus because we want to make sure that things are done accurately. Phase 1 and phase 2, we did things like we looked at all of the standard job description summaries and compared it to the responsibilities within each SJD to make sure they align, that they're accurate, that it describes the work that is being done. We also looked at things like exemption status, Fair Labor Standards Act. Are these titles exempt or non-exempt? And we applied the appropriate status via federal law to each one of our SJDs. So things like that took place in phase 1 and phase 2 of our QA process. To the right of the green line, you'll see phase 3 of QA. That's where we're taking individual employees across UW-Madison and ensuring that their mapping is done accurately. It's accurately mapped to the SJD that describes the work you do, as well as aligned across school, college, and division to make sure we have equitable mapping. Another work stream you'll see to the right of the green line is the compensation and titling structures. We are in the process of developing that salary structure, should be done within the next month or so. As Mark mentioned, once we have that completed, we will be able to see if we do have pockets that are underpaid, overpaid, paid accurately, where we're at with everything. And once we have that data, in the middle section there, you'll see the long-term compensation strategy. At that point, we'll be able to develop that strategy going forward to be able to address any concerns that we've identified. You'll also see letter notification. Mark mentioned that you'll all receive an individualized letter in the month of May talking about your new title and the appeals process, which will be available in the month of May. The bullet point below letter notification says that the salary structure will be posted. That is going to be the new salary structure and will be posted to the TTC website in the month of May. The bottom work stream, as you'll see, is really campus partnership focused. You'll notice a lot of training opportunities. We have HR training, we have manager training, we have salary structure training, a lot of different training opportunities and development, in addition to the things we offer on our TTC website. So I would highly encourage all of you to not only go to the website and participate in some of the opportunities for learning we have out there, but also to attend this training. You'll also notice that there is the appeals process that will start in the month of May, and Megan will talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes here. So Mark mentioned the timeline shift. So this slide depicts some of the key work streams that will be occurring month by month during the time period before we actually go live on July 1st. So in February, we will have our quality assurance completed, so phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. By the end of April, all of the employee-manager conversations will be conducted. In May, the salary structure will be posted, the notification letters will be sent out, and the appeals process will begin. And then on July 1st, we will actually flip that switch within our software system so that the new title structure and the new salary structure will then be active. So as you can see by this timeline, what we're doing is doing a phased-in strategy, a phased-in implementation of this project by getting all of these things done prior to actually flipping that switch on July 1st and going live with the new structures. So why did we shift the timeline? Probably the biggest reason is really for the real thorough quality assurance initiative. We really want to make sure that we do this good review and evaluation so that we get it right at the beginning. We want title consistency across the divisions to make sure everyone is mapped with consistency among school, college, and division. The timeline shift also allows for more time for manager training, more time for everyone to go to our website and participate in some of the opportunities out there for learning, and more time for the employee-manager engagements or those discussions. So at this point, I would like to turn this over to Tina. She's going to talk a little bit about the employee conversations.
All right, thanks. All right. So just want to make a quick note before I get started to say that I see a lot of you taking notes diligently, so that's great. And we are also recording this particular session so that come in a few more weeks, once all the videos are edited and things like that, this will be posted to our website so you can review the content of this recording or of this forum later on. So just so you all know, and with the slides posted and things like that. The other thing I just want to mention related to that is that we much rather be down on the floor to prevent us from tripping and things like that. But because of recording, we are standing here up on the podium. That's why we're kind of up here and tied to the podium here. So to talk about the employee conversation, following what Diane has said, this is kind of the next step for employees, kind of as far as the project goes. And I want to kind of step back a little bit and give some context for these employee conversations, because these conversations do not happen in a vacuum. There are some steps that happen before the conversations happen and some things that happen after the conversations happen. So first of all, HR matches employees to new titles and SJDs. So this work actually started back in the fall of 2019. HR has been working really hard to match every single employee to a new title in our new title structure. And we're now wrapping up that process with a QA kind of part of this process in the month of February. So once that is done, the next step is for managers and supervisors to then look at how all their employees have been mapped, look at the titles that they have been assigned, their employees have been assigned to, and do kind of a confirmation process. So they can look at it and say, yep, that's right, looks right, looks like the right title, the right job description, I agree, we can move on. Or in some cases, maybe a manager will look at that title mapping and say, I'm not really sure about that, what about this? Maybe explore some other options and work with their HR units to kind of confirm and work through any suggested changes, questions, concerns that they may have. Once managers are comfortable with how their employees have been mapped, then they can begin to work on the position descriptions for each of their employees. So the SJD or standard job description is kind of the foundation, and then the position description kind of builds on that. And we'll go through that, kind of what that PD looks like in a little bit. So manager, once they have gone through and created a PD that's specific for each and every one of their individual employees, then they're ready to have that employee conversation, to sit down with their employees and talk through, what's your new title, what does your PD look like, and things like that. Once that conversation has happened, employees have had a chance to ask questions, to provide feedback, suggest possible changes, and kind of have that back and forth. And the managers can then take a look and see how they can resolve maybe some of the questions or concerns that employees have brought up during those conversations. Once all those things have been addressed, then come May is when a notification letter will be sent out. So we're really expecting that in the month of May, when that notification letter comes out, it would not be the first time you're seeing your title and kind of learning about your position description. You've already had that conversation, you've already looked at it. So you're this is more just a kind of official thing to kind of notify you, but really you've already seen it and had a chance to have discussions about it. The other thing I want to point out with this is the way we're depicting it seems like really clean, points on a timeline. But in fact, this is probably much more of a kind of a iterative process. So maybe for some cases, it may be one conversation and then you're done. Sometimes it may be a series of conversations with your supervisors. So this may happen kind of all different ways, but this is the general process. That's what happens with these employee conversations. All right, and also, the purpose of the conversation. So some people have asked us, why can't we just send out the notification letter already and get it over with? And the reason why we want to actually stop and have these conversations, take these couple months to have these conversations with every employee, is because, first of all, we want to take this opportunity to confirm that the title and the PD does accurately describe the work that you do. So it's kind of like we're getting closer and closer. HR takes a crack at it, your managers are looking at it, and now you as the person doing the work can also take a look at it and provide some input as far as whether this is a title in the PD that is describing your responsibilities. So the goal of the conversation really is mainly to confirm that this is accurate. The second purpose we want to make sure to cover during this conversation is to provide each employee an opportunity to ask questions, provide feedback. This is really meant to be a conversation, a dialogue, and not just a kind of like, this is what it is and end of story. The third thing is we want to make sure we resolve any concerns before the appeals process begins. So as we saw earlier in the timeline, there's an appeals process that begins in May, and certainly we're all able to initiate appeals if we would like to. But on the other hand, we would also prefer that we don't have to resort to a formal appeals process if we could resolve any of those concerns earlier on, as opposed to waiting until May. So during this time period of employee conversations, if there are some concerns, some questions you can resolve, informally with your supervisor, with HR, we'd much rather do that than wait until May to kind of go through that formal process. And then finally, this is an opportunity for you as an employee to ask questions of your supervisors. So what exactly you can expect to kind of talk about during these conversations? So first of all, you'll be talking about your new title. So that's kind of the big main thing, right? So which title in the SJD library or the standard job description library is your title? Second of all, you'll be, and this is kind of a bulk of your conversation, we'll be going through the position description, your PD. And it's going to be in a new format, so you kind of want to probably walk through it piece by piece to understand all the components of it. And third of all, if you choose to, so part of the discussion would be whether it's appropriate for you to have a business title in addition to your official title of record. And if you do choose to have a business title, what that business title might be. So having that discussion. And finally, some next steps. And this will be kind of what exactly those next steps would be dependent on how the conversation goes, right? So maybe in some conversations, employees will have questions, and the manager may not have the answers right away. They may have to go back and do some research and bring it back to you to provide those answers, or maybe there's some issues that need to be resolved. So there may be some follow-up conversations that may happen. Or your manager might have an opportunity also to share next steps in terms of what's the appeals process that's available to you. So some of those next steps will be part of the conversation as well. So there are also things that will not be included during this conversation. So first of all, is a new salary range associated with the title. And one of the main reasons why this is not part of the conversation is simply, as you saw earlier in the timeline, that salary structure is still being developed, still being built. And so at the time of the conversation, that information is not available. So HR doesn't have that information, your supervisor doesn't have that information, and all employees don't have that information as far as the salary range associated with the new title. And the other thing that won't be available at this time is benefits. So it certainly is a goal of the project to enhance benefits so we're a more competitive employer. But simply, again, because of the timeline, so those benefits recommendations are still being developed, are still being kind of thought through how exactly we're going to implement these benefits enhancements. So at the time of the conversation, benefits is not part of the discussion, simply because it's not ready to be talked about yet. Sorry, did I skip anything? Oh, yes. So there is one thing we want to make sure to note, and sorry, it's kind of at the bottom of the slide there in kind of a smaller font, is that, so in the position description, and we'll see kind of a screenshot of this in a little bit, there is a line for employee signature. And we just want to make sure to note that some units will ask you to sign that PD, write your name, sign your name at the bottom of the PD, and that is merely a read receipt. So indication that you have looked at the PD, you saw it. It does not mean that if you sign it, that you cannot appeal. You cannot appeal in May when that time becomes available. Okay, so other things to think about as you're having this conversation, again, remembering that the goal of the conversation is really to confirm that the PD is accurately describing the work that you do. So here are some questions for you to think about to see if, to help with that confirmation process. So one question may be, does my title in PD reflect my essential role and responsibilities? Another question you may ask is, if I were to summarize my job in 1 or 2 sentences, would that match the job summary that's in the PD? So all PDs will have a 1 to 2 sentence summary. And if you were to step back and think about your job and have to summarize it in 1 or 2 sentences, would that summary look pretty similar to what's in the PD? Another question you may think about is, do I spend most of my time performing the responsibilities, the tasks that's listed in the PD? And the final question you may ask yourself is, if I saw this description as a job posting, would I equate the posting to my job? So if you were to go out there and do a little job search and then look at some job postings, would you look at that, if that was a job posting you saw somewhere, would you look at that job posting and be like, yeah, that's pretty much what I do. Yeah, that describes what I do. But those are just some ways to think about the PD as you're looking through it to see if it is a match. And one of the reasons we want you to think about this in this way is because it is going to be looking pretty different, the PDs and PVLs that we have today versus the PDs of future in terms of kind of the focus. So right now, a lot of our position descriptions are much more detailed, much more task-oriented, so really spelling out really specifically all the things that you do, so pretty long. In the future, position descriptions will be much shorter and will be much higher level. So the focus is a lot more on what we call responsibilities. So thinking about the work that you do at a higher level, at a broader level, so much more general, as opposed to being really, really detailing all the different tasks that you do. So that is one difference you will see between the position descriptions of today and what you will see in the future. I want to make sure you're kind of prepared for that. So going through the PD then, kind of a side-by-side comparison, speaking of what PDs look like today and how it compares to the PDs of the future. So right now, position descriptions, so first of all, it's called different things. So generally, for academic staff, we think of PDs as PVLs, position vacancy listings, right? That's generally where our work is all described. For university staff, it's a position description. So it's called different things depending on your employment status. In the future, it's going to be called a position description no matter what your employment status is. So that's one difference. Another difference is that right now the formats vary really widely between all employees. You can be doing really similar jobs, maybe even working the same unit, but your PDs might look different. Right? So the formats really vary. So some are written, and they're all written kind of in different styles. So in the future, PDs will be a lot more consistent, more standardized, and there'll be kind of a standard format that it follows. So there's a lot more consistency in how our PDs are written. Another thing is that right now, PDs or PVLs are typically really long. So it can be anywhere from 2, 4, 5, 6 pages, single space, 10-point font, so really, really dense position descriptions. In the future, it'll be much shorter, again, much more concise, describing work at a much higher level, as opposed to being very, very detailed. So that'll be another difference you'll notice. The final difference you'll notice is that right now, again, because formats vary widely, it's kind of a more free text style kind of PDs that we use. So even if you do really similar things from across schools, colleges, or divisions, your jobs are described really differently, right? 2 people doing pretty much the same job in 2 different places have really different PDs. So it's hard to tell that they're actually doing similar work, as Mark alluded to earlier. So in the future, because we kind of all start, if you all have the same job, you start with that same foundational SJD, so the PDs will look a lot more similar. So it is easier for you For example, if you're looking for other opportunities across campus, for you to look at another PD or job posting somewhere and see, oh yeah, that's pretty much what I do now, or that's what I do now plus this, right? So it's a lot easier to see how jobs are similar, where the overlap is, as opposed to trying to read these 2, 3, 4-page long documents with really detailed things and trying to figure out whether that's a similar job as yours or not. So that's another advantage, and that you'll be expecting in the PDs of the future. All right, so talking a little bit more about PDs and what they look like, we're kind of going through this is a kind of a draft of what the position description looks like in the future. And I know it's a little bit hard to read the screenshot of what that draft looks like, so I'll just kind of talk through it piece by piece. So the top section there, kind of in the gray, is just some personal information, like your employee ID, your name, and things like that. The second section there, it says job summary and essential responsibilities. And these are things that come directly from the standard job description that's out now, available in the SJD library. So the job summary, again, is that 1 to 2 sentence summary of the job. And the essential responsibilities are the kind of the core responsibilities we expect people in that job to do. So usually 3 to 8 kind of bullet points of responsibilities. The next section then are the unique responsibilities. And so these elements, and I'll go through them step by step, but these elements, I just want to make sure to be clear, are optional elements. So if the job summary and essential responsibilities are adequate, your supervisor in HR may or may not choose to add additional things to it. But so for example, your essential responsibilities are captured, but you do a couple other things in addition to what's described there, that can be captured in the unique responsibilities. Right? So in the unique responsibilities sections, there's those additional things that you do on top of what's already described in essential responsibilities. The next section there is license and certification. So this would be if your position requires some particular licenses or certification, it can be called out there in the PD. The other section is job category, again, kind of an optional element right now. Those are things kind of like if you're an essential employee in case of inclement weather or something like that. Other elements would include physical demand, so ability to lift and those type of things, and work environment. And this is typically calling out really extreme work environments like extreme heat. You have to work in constant humidity, work with hazardous materials, those type of things. And the final optional element in the PD is tasks. So some work units may choose to use this particular section of the PD to actually, this is the place then to spell out very detailed things that you may do, or describe the things you do in a very detailed way, kind of exactly what you're gonna do, how are you gonna do it, and things like that. So those are the pieces of the position description. The other thing, again, kind of remembering back to that conversation, what you'd be talking about is whether you want to adopt a business title. So just to kind of talk a little bit more about why a business title. The purpose of a business title is to give more specificity to the work that you do. If your title, your official title of record, isn't specific enough to describe exactly what it is that you do, you may want to adopt a business title to give more clarity around that. And where you can use a business title, you will see the business title would include places like in the UW directory. So if someone were to go into the directory and search your name, and if you have a business title in the system, then that business title will actually pull up. So that's one place where it will show up. Other places would include your email signature, department website, office signage, your business cards, things like that. So it's really kind of for business purposes that you'd be able to use a business title. So some examples of what would be appropriate for business titles. So let's say I have an official title of record of Recreation Program Coordinator. It might be possible for me to have a business title of Coordinator of Competitive Sports, because in my coordination, the program I coordinate is competitive sports. So it makes sense for me to have a business title that helps specify that area that I coordinate. What wouldn't be so appropriate is for me to adopt a business title of Director of Recreation, because that kind of misrepresents my level of authority, right? I'm not really at that director level, so to say that I'm a director of recreation wouldn't be appropriate. Another example, so if I have an official title of lecturer, it might be appropriate for me to adopt a business title of Lecturer of Economics, because that is my area of expertise, and that's the department I'm in, so it makes sense for me to have that title. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to adopt a title of Professor, because that's an official title, that's another group of employees, right? It wouldn't be the right business title for me. Another example we can look at is outreach specialist. So it might be possible for me to adopt the title of outreach specialist senior to indicate my level of experience on the job. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to adopt the business title of outreach associate, because that is a job title that's already used by another group of employees. So I can't duplicate that title. Because if my business title is outreach associate, that most likely means that I should be mapped to an outreach associate, right, instead of a outreach specialist. So some examples there. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Megan, who's going to talk to you about notifications and appeals.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, wonderful. All right, so my name is Megan Owens. I am with the Office of Human Resources and Compensation and Titling. And going to go through a couple sections today. The first being the notifications and appeals section, and also then the salary structure section. So to begin with, for notifications and appeals, Tina and Diane both talked to you about the timeline, and that by April 30th, everybody will have had their conversations with their managers about their title and come to a resolution to some of where that will be going. At that point is when we will start to issue and generate letters notifying you of the change in the title. So we're calling those the employee notification memos. Excuse me. So employee notification memos will be received via electronically, so via email, unless we know that you don't have email, and then we'll find out another method of distribution. Those electronic notification notices will come, like I said, will come to your email. Right now is where I guess we'd like to make sure that we caution, remind people that we will be sending these to you, but you will not be asked to reply to us. So if you receive an email fashioned like this, that looks like this, that seems to have similar wording like this, but then asks you to send us information, don't do it. That's spam. That is not something that we will ever ask you to do via email. So just so you're aware, we just don't want somebody, as we've heard recently in the news, people, unsavory characters pick up this type of information and then try to exploit us. So make sure that if you get this information, it's just an informational email, nothing for you to reply to. Okay, so in your notification memo, it will include your new title of record, your current hourly wage-based salary, so that there should be no change from what you had the day before. There will be no change in this notification memo from what you already have. Your business title, the salary grade, which I'll talk to you about in a couple minutes, your Fair Labor Standards Act exemption status, so whether you're hourly, non-exempt versus salaried or exempt, and also title appeal information, which I'll talk to you about in a little bit. So all of that information will be included in this memo. So the title appeals process, I know we've talked about this a few times, but again, I'm happy to go through it again with individuals as well. So the appeals process included in your notification memo will be a link to the title appeals process, okay? And that will be a link to information, so there'll be a form for individuals to fill out should they decide to pursue this route. But wanted to go through what that appeals process looks like with you, so you kind of understand where we're going, how this would be handled if in fact you decide that you are not in agreement with the title that you've been assigned to. So you'll receive your title of notice and your record, and it'll say, here's your process, but please remember this is not a grievance process. This is an appeal process. So step one will be an informal resolution period. So we are going to have, before the window opens up to file appeals is what we're calling it, we're going to have an informal resolution process, and we fully expect that individuals will first engage with their managers, supervisors, as well as their divisional human resources representative and have conversations about what's going on. Like, how do we get to this title? Why am I here? So that you understand. In hopes that we can get that resolved at that first step, just having an informal conversation. However, if in fact that doesn't work out, then we do have a second step, which is the employee would submit a written appeal to the manager and the divisional human resources office. That written appeal, would include the form that is linked to in your employee notification memo. that would also be submitted electronically. Or it could be also dropped off in paper if that's more preferable to the employee. If that resolution, if that formal resolution with the divisional office doesn't meet the employee's satisfaction or still needs more clarification on what's going on, there is a step 3. Step 3 is that the employee notifies your divisional office that you disagree in writing and that your step 2 decision that was made will be forwarded to the Office of Human Resources in the Compensation and Titling Office, and they would then review the information. So the employee would not have to resubmit anything. It's very much a forwarding of the information that you've already submitted. So not a lot of work on your part. Obviously, if there's additional information, we could certainly request that, necessary, but it would just be an employee sending an email to the divisional office, letting them know that their disagreement with step 2, please forward this to step 3. Step 3, Office of Human Resources issues a decision. If the employee disagrees with the decision at step 3, there is a step 4, which is the Job Classification Appeals Panel that reviews. Again, the employee would have the opportunity to email, notify the Office of Human Resources that you disagree, and then that information that you've submitted would be submitted to the appeals panel. The appeals panel consists of a member of the Office of Human Resources, a divisional human resources office manager, and a member nominated by the representative governance body. So if the appeal is for a university staff member, then a member of the university staff governance would be asked to come and sit on the appeal panel. If the appeal is for an academic staff member, then academic staff governance would be asked to send a member to represent them at that appeal. That appeal panel meets, reviews the documentation, decides whether to agree or disagree with the information and the decision that was made in step 3. If the decision in step 3 is overturned, then that request would be forwarded to the Director of Human Resources, our Chief Human Resources Officer, Mark Walter's office, and he would issue the final decision. Okay? So there's our process. So what can be appealed? The only thing that can be appealed is your new official job title. So you are disagreeing with the new official job title that has been given. You're like, I disagree, I don't believe this, it should be something else. Fine. What cannot be appealed? Your salary grade. That can't be appealed. Language in the position description or standard job description cannot be appealed. Okay, so typical responsibilities within each standard job description is locked in. It's the same for everybody. That cannot be changed. You can certainly work with your manager on the other responsibilities that are added, the unique responsibilities that have been added, to see if there's language in there that needs to be changed, but that cannot be appealed. But certainly if you have some concerns about the unique responsibilities, discuss those with your manager, supervisor, and see if we can get those revised. Your FLSA exemption status cannot be appealed. Those are 3 areas that cannot be appealed. When can this when this window start? So, due to the timing of when these notices are going out, and of course our 9-month employees, we have 2 windows. So for our 12-month employees, or people who work year-round, no break-in service, that kind of thing, aren't basically subject to the academic year, we'll have this open window where we're of May 1st to May 15th, where we're saying, have those conversations with your manager supervisor about the standard job description you've been assigned to. Have those conversations, go through that informal process, see if we can come to some resolution during that time period. If during that time period you can't come to a resolution, and that actually can go on, you will have from May 15th until June 15th to file a formal appeal. So in theory, you actually have from the beginning of May until June 15th to have those informal conversations. So it's not something you have to jump into right away, right? I think we'd all, just assume everything get resolved to people's satisfaction in an informal process, if possible. Then we would expect after June 15th, we're expecting to have all of these appeals resolved by September through December time period. Now, why December? Because our 9-month employees will be gone, right, by that May 15th period. So in order to accommodate that, we are going to open up the appeals process for the 9-month employees to be August 17th, which I believe is the first day of the academic year, through September 17th. So that'll be that window for our 9-month employees. And then we'll have that appeals window through December. Now, in the event that we have some appeals that cross both A basis and C basis, we want to have some flexibility there, so we're making sure that our A basis and C basis employees are both treated the same. So we might need to extend in some areas till December. Okay? All right, so that is our appeals process. During the appeals, the notification memos, I talked to you a little bit about this new thing about the salary grade, and that'll be included in your notification memos. So the salary structure is where we see salary grade. So what is a salary structure? Salary structure, or jobs in a salary structure, are organized into salary grades based on market midpoint values, and we'll talk about that in a minute. They reflect pay in the market, and they take into account the UW's organizational structure. So, we all currently have a salary structure. It's two separate salary structures, but we have salary structures currently. What we're doing now is making one salary structure, but in concept, it's the same. So, if you are currently, for example, university staff, you have salaries and ranges. So, for example, you have the O2, which is the administrative salary structure. You have O3, which is blue-collar salary structure. And then you've got O4, which are craft workers. And I can go on and on and on. There's lots of them. So there are all these salary structures, and within each structure, you have ranges. So you have O2-6, O3-9, O4-01. I think they're all O4-01s. So all of these we currently have a salary structure. For academic staff, for example, you have a salary structure you have 1, 2, 3, 4, you have your ranges, they're all assigned numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and within each number is a range, a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum. So this is all something we currently have. We just currently have at least, actually we have more, but right now we have 2 of them. So we're going to be talking about a little bit about how we're going to bring those together in our next couple slides here. We're also going to talk about promotion and how that definition of promotion is changing a little bit for some of you. So promotion will now be considered a change in the salary grade, whereas progression, another word that may be changing definition a little bit for some of you, is movement across the range. So we have grades and we have ranges. Okay? So again, salary grade. So this is what salary grades will be now. We will have one salary structure for everybody. Yay! So salary grades. Jobs in a salary structure are organized into salary ranges and grades, and each grade includes job titles that have similar salary ranges. So as I said before, promotion is a change in your salary grade. So as I said before, where academic staff have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. University staff have O2, O3, O5, all that fun stuff. Now we're all going to put those all together. So we're all going to be somewhere in this 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 kind of area. We'll all be in the same salary grades. So we'll share that. It should be really awesome. So ways to promote. So as I said before, promotion is an increase moving into a new position in a higher grade. How can people do that? Many people have been asking, like, well, hey, you're getting all these new titles. How do I advance in my career? So within promotions, you can promote a recruitment. You can apply and take a new job. So if you take a new job in a higher grade, that would be a promotion. Or a change in responsibilities with a title change. So if you have a change in your responsibilities that merits, we change your standard job description into a new title that's in a higher grade, we can do that. That still exists as a possibility. So, however, sometimes it may be requested. So the field position has changes in needs and responsibilities. That's an absolute reason to look at how your position is totally titled. Or a different standard job description is more appropriate. So ways one can promote. Salary range. I mentioned this earlier. Again, we currently have ranges. We have minimums, we have midpoints, and we have maximums. We just have a lot of them. And this new structure will have us in grades and in like ranges. We will still have midpoints, and maximums. Okay? Progression then is now what we're called, is now movement across that range. So movement from the minimum of the range towards the maximum of the range, progressing through the range. So how does your pay increase? How does one progress from a minimum to the midpoint to the maximum of the range? How do you progress through? We have a number of different ways to progress through your range, and a lot of them you are all familiar with currently. Okay? So performance. We still have performance adjustments that allow individuals to progress through the range. Parity. So parity and equity. These are both adjustments that we currently do right now, but we currently lump them together as equity. Going forward, we're actually going to break them out. Where parity is when I'm looking at others within my current title, am I being paid at the level as my peers are being paid at? And if not, then maybe I'm worthy of a parity or should be given a parity adjustment. That's parity. We currently call that equity. It's actually parity. Equity is when we are looking at addressing salary differences relative to protective status. So we're going to call that out a little bit more. That's equity. Okay? We also we have market increases currently. We will also continue to have market increases because we are going to continue to address market influences. We do a little bit more informed now because we're going to have market-informed ranges, but we're going to address our market increases that need to be addressed. And then change in unique duties. Again, you have this currently. It's currently in place for you. If you have a change in responsibilities, you will be able to receive or eligible for an increase in your pay. So that's another way that one can progress through the range. Okay. So, the other thing I think that if you've been, I think Mark, I saw a large show of hands of people who've been at the forums before, that you've heard quite a bit that the question is, oh, well, where is the money to come up with this? How are we going to pay for this? If we do this, am I going to get a raise? All that fun stuff. You're absolutely right. TTC is about creating a structure that is market informed that allows us to look at where we are at within the market. It doesn't provide us money to do, if we do find that we are behind market in areas, TTC doesn't provide us with the money. But we have individuals who can certainly take a look at our status and see if we do have that money, and that's where our leadership comes in. So just a slide here kind of talking, letting you know a little bit about what our approach is towards identifying those areas where we might need additional funds to address some areas. So right now we're in that February to May area. So we are currently, as I said, determining cost implications. Are there areas that need to be addressed and determining future scenarios? Okay, great. So at this time, I'm going to turn this back over to Diane.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, so as you know, benefits play a really key component in our overall compensation package. So we're going to talk a little bit about benefits. And what you see here on the screen is a timeline of where we're at with the benefits. We've come to many forums and we've talked about benefits and what's going on with the stream and what are we going to do for benefit enhancements. And this talks a little bit about where we're at. To the very left, you'll see that it talks about the review of the benefits strategies. So what we did is we have a group of benefit experts, and they took the data from the benefits preferences survey that we talked about a little while ago, as well as the benefits valuation analysis that I'm going to talk about in a minute. We took the compiled data from those two initiatives and reviewed and analyzed it to show us, do we need to add benefits, or what do we need to add for benefits? And then the center section of this timeline really talks through looking at creating the benefit recommendations to send to leadership, costing them out. What are the cost implications for each benefit enhancement that we might recommend? Are there benefits that we need to attend to sooner than later, as well as what can we do for the long haul, right? What's the long-term strategy for implementing and enhancing our overall UW benefit offerings? So to the right there, you'll see that is the overall benefits strategy that we will be putting forth in the next couple of months. So looking at this, these are the two work streams that we utilized when, in collaboration with Mercer Consulting, the TTC team analyzed all of the UW benefits. The first thing we did is the Benefits Preferences Survey. Many of you participated in that, and that was really our internal temperature check. It was to ask employees, what employee benefits do you value for yourself and your families? That's our internal check. It helps us to determine how well our benefits are meeting the needs of our employees, as well as to shape the future as far as enhancements go. So that was one of our work streams. The other one was the benefits valuation analysis. That was our external temperature check, where we went out to market and we said, how do our benefit offerings compare or stack up to other employers? And that helps us to determine, again, where do we need to go with benefits long term? Along the bottom of the screen, you will see that April forums, July forums, November forums, we talked about benefits, we talked about the preferences survey and the BVA and the results, and we gave you a lot of information. But in December, what we did is we compiled all of the data from both the preferences survey and the BVA into a summary report for you. So you don't have to dig through raw data because there's a lot of it, but this report will give you summary data on both of those work streams for your evaluation. I'd suggest that you go out and look at that. It is on our TTC website. This is the Benefits Preferences Survey. We overall had 18,634 people participate in the survey, system-wide. So that's a wonderful number. For Madison, it was 54%. And the reason we were a little higher than the overall system percentage of 47% is because we're such a large portion of the overall system. So 54% is hugely statistically valid when we're looking at survey responses. So we appreciate all of your responses. It gave us a lot of information to look through, and thus will help shape and form the benefit enhancements going forward. So looking at what matters most and what came out of that survey, the majority of our respondents said that the UW benefit packages currently meets their needs. They're very happy with it. It also is a reason they stay employed at UW-Madison. However, everybody across all age categories, across all employee categories, said that pay was number one as far as what is valued most. What's most important? Pay. Followed by healthcare. And healthcare really is a couple of points. One is the benefits we currently have, people enjoy, but more so it's about controlling the healthcare costs. As you know, with Act 10, we were provided with things like co-pays and co-insurance and deductibles and things that none of us like, but that was Act 10. And so concern out there amongst our employees about continuing to control those healthcare costs. Stable employment came in number 3. Retirement. People are very pleased with our retirement system and don't want to see that change. It is a statutory benefit, so is not changing, but people are very much value our retirement. And then the 5th thing that came in was paid time off. And I specifically called that parental leave because people called that out as parental leave. Many of our Big Tens, as Mark talked about earlier, they do provide paid parental leave. So we are looking at that when we're talking, making recommendations to leadership for benefit enhancements. We are definitely looking at the paid parental leave part of things. Other things that came in very high, things like flexible work schedules, the ability to bank your sick leave to be used post-retirement for the payment of insurance premiums came in very high. And the income continuation insurance that we currently provide came in very high. So those are some of the results from the Benefits Preferences Survey. So what about results from benefits valuation, the BVA? Well, what we did to gather that information when we talk about comparing to other employers and comparing to market is we took a look at different employee groups or peer groups. And the first one is the university peer group on your left side, and we had 3 different groups within that. The first group was large public institutions, like all of our Big Tens, UCLA, UC Berkeley, University of Texas, and many, many more. We had a very large population of large public universities. The second group was public and private universities like Marquette, North Carolina, SUNY, Buffalo, and again, many, many others comprised in that group. And the third peer group for universities or higher ed is really large private universities. Stanford, Harvard, Boston, Cornell, Duke, and again, many, many others. The other place we looked were the Wisconsin peer groups, and we looked at two different sectors of peer groups within Wisconsin. One is large private corporations, so the private sector, and public municipalities. So City of Madison, Madison Metropolitan School District, CUNA Mutual, TDS, City of Racine, City of Stevens Point. I mean, there were just many, many in that group as well. Second group was Milwaukee-based private sector employers with a Wisconsin footprint, meaning that we have employees all over the state of Wisconsin, Land's End, Northwestern Mutual, Kohl's, and again, many, many more in those groups as well. So these were the peer groups that we measured our UW benefits and said, how well do we stack up to the benefits that all of these higher education as well as public municipalities and private sector employers, how do we stack up to what they offer? And here's how we stack up. UW did really well in both areas. For the university peer groups, we lead in group health insurance, we lead in group dental insurance, and in life insurance. Where we could possibly show a tad of improvement would be in our retirement plan, would be in post-retirement medical, and would be in paid leave. So again, it comes back, that paid leave comes back to us, right? So we are looking at that idea of putting some parental leave as a recommendation. For the Wisconsin peer groups, remembering those two different peer groups that we looked at, public municipalities, private sector, we lead greatly. So up to 29%, we lead in retirement package, we lead in group health, we lead in post-retirement medical offerings, and we lead in paid time off. Where we can improve with that sector is in dental and life insurance. So these are the results of the BVA, or the Benefits Valuation Analysis, that was conducted by Mercer for UW-Madison. And here is where all of the compiled results from those two work streams live. It's out in our resource library on the TTC website. So again, highly encourage you to go out and look at that. A lot of very interesting information. I'll turn this over now to Anna, who's going to talk about some learning opportunities.
Thanks, Diane. Can you hear me okay? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up in the back. My name's Anna. I work in communications for the Office of Human Resources, and I just want to tell you about some resources that are available to you. I know a lot of people are taking notes today, and I'm seeing a lot of people taking screen caps. I want to let you know that we are posting the presentation slides and a recording of this on our website later, so maybe that'll give you a little bit more time to review the material and content. I know there's a lot of information that we've shared today. And so as we think about the resources that are available to you, and Tina had talked about the employee conversations that you'll be having with your manager or with HR, in order to prepare for those conversations, if you want to learn more or you want to just hear more about TTC and get a better understanding, I highly recommend that you check out our website. We have fact sheets, we have learning series, we have videos. We know that different people learn in different ways, and so we want to try and present information that's as open and transparent as possible. So I highly recommend that you go out and check out what's on our website. And then also we know that change can be really hard. And as you're learning about TTC, this may bring up a lot of feelings about questions in your career, and maybe you're not really feeling certain, you're feeling isolated or alone. And that can be concerning, and we want to make sure that you have resources and support, and we want to let you know that there are resources available to you as an employee on campus. And so to help you navigate and find out what those resources are, we've created something on our website that's called Where to Turn, and it is a Qualtrics survey, and you can go in on the website and the resource library, and you can click through and just sort of answer some self-selected questions. It's a confidential tool. and it will help direct you to the right resource. So whether that's career counseling, the Abendsons, the Office of Employee Assistance, it'll just kind of help you determine where you can go to for more information and support instead of just trying to look and search through information on your own. So I highly recommend that you check that out. And also, as Tina talked about, the manager training, we do have the online manager training. We have links to in-person manager training and a whole host of other resources. So I highly recommend that you check those materials out. And then also, as you think about having and preparing for that conversation, one thing that you can do too is check out the standard job description library. Diane had mentioned that there's a QA process that's happening. As that information is being updated, we are updating the standard job descriptions in the library. And just as a reminder, the standard job descriptions are the foundation for what will be created for your personal job description, which will be your PD that Tina had talked about. And if you don't have access to a computer, as we know many of our employees on campus are not online, you can talk to your Human Resources Division, and so you can get a paper copy of that as well. And if you need a copy of your current PVL or position description, I recommend that you talk with your Human Resources Office, and your local HR unit is also another great resource that you can continue to get information from along the way. And later this week, we're going to be back again tomorrow at HSLC, or the Health Sciences Learning Center, and we'll be doing the same presentation again. If you know anyone who hasn't attended a forum, I highly recommend that you let a colleague know and encourage them to attend an event. And then we'll also be hosting an online forum for many of our employees who are not located here on campus, or for employees who just aren't able to get away from their desk. You can check that out as well. And then as the project continues to go on, in May, we're going to be posting the salary structure on our website. And so we know that employees are going to continue to have questions, and we want to have this be an open exchange. And so we are going to be getting the TTC band back together again in May and June. And so we'll be doing more presentations and forums. And so I highly encourage you to attend and to let your coworkers know about that. We'll be posting it on our website, and we'll be putting posters out again as well. And so these are more of these forums, and our last one will be going through June 9th.